So, hello, I think we'll get this started. To everyone watching, we're just going to do a little bit of an intro. We're going to say welcome, and then we'll kind of walk through what we're going to do today. So welcome. My name is Leah Brown. I work for IT Revolution. I'm the managing editor over here. And for the last year and a bit, I've had the pleasure of getting to work with all of these lovely faces, as well as a couple others. Helen and Andres are not, I believe, here with us today. But for the last year, as I said, we've been working on this wonderful, lovely book right here that is out today. Hello, congratulations. Woohoo! So how this kind of got started is, well, automated governance. It's important, but it's kind of boring. And this lovely group got together to discuss it and work on it at the DevOps Enterprise Forum in 2021, correct?
That's right,
April. And we decided to make it a little bit more interesting and maybe turn it into a short story. And when we read that here at IT Revolution, we were like, yeah, no, this needs to be a novel. This needs to be out there in the same way as Phoenix and Unicorn Project, because it's a story that needs to be told. It's a subject that's going to make so much more sense when you see it in action. And what they were able to put together was, well, just wonderful, as I hope everyone out there is going to learn and read about over the next several weeks as you get your copy. So I'm going to give a brief overview of what this book is all about. Then I'm going to hand it over to the wonderful co-author, John Willis here. And he's going to moderate our lovely fireside chat today. He's going to ask everyone here, all the authors, a few questions, maybe around how they came to write this book. We're going to discuss maybe some of the real life stories behind some of the situations they find themselves in. And we'll open up to questions from the audience. So everyone who's watching, please feel free to use that Q&A button or the chat and ask your questions, and we'll get to them as we go along. If we can't get through all the questions, don't worry, we'll send them off to the authors afterwards and maybe provide some follow-up blogs or something along those lines. But mostly, we're here to celebrate this wonderful accomplishment and have a little bit of fun as we talk about automated governance. So, quick description of what this book is. This book, Investments Unlimited, is about a fictional financial company that has a problem. Its risk, governance, and security policies are out of compliance, and federal auditors have issued over a dozen matters requiring attention, or MRAs, to the firm over the last year. The company either didn't fully address them or didn't address them at all. And now auditors believe the company's inconsistent security processes have resulted in software vulnerabilities that bad actors could exploit. As a final warning, the federal auditors issue an MRIA, matter requiring immediate attention to the company, and this is not good news. CEO Susan Jones is charged with a seemingly impossible task: restructure IUI's governance, risk, and security processes over the next few months, or hand the company over to federal regulators and leave every employee out of a job. Together, a group of determined software developers and representatives from product, risk, audit, and security develop a product that they lovingly call Turbo Eureka, which is a fully automated governance system built into the software development pipeline. This system checks for critical security vulnerabilities, it standardizes code review, keeps track of open source components, among other things. In short, it makes governance easy. Though the project faces scrutiny and naysayers and plenty of challenges along the way, the whole C-suite finally gets on board. Federal regulators clear the MRA, and Investments Unlimited is poised to develop even more tech-based systems that improve its resilience and market strengths. So this exciting story is what we are here to talk about today. I'm going to hand it over to the lovely John Willis to start the conversation, and then we'll also answer some questions from the audience. Off to you.
Thanks, Leah, and thanks for all your help. You've been incredibly helpful from day one on this. It's been great. I wanted to, and I don't think lovely is a great way to describe me, but I wanted to do this sort of sequentially, like sort of walk through, I think this whole thing really started with a conversation Topo and I had around 2017, 2018. Topo had written this brilliant article about how Capital One did their deployments. And the original question was, why does audit suck in a large corporation, right? And we just started chewing on this. And for those who don't know, Gene invites about, I don't know, somewhere between about 40 or 50, maybe more every year to Portland, last two virtual, and we work on these papers. And so in 2019, John Rez and Topo Powell, we worked on a paper that was called the DevOps Automated Governance, and it was a reference architecture. And we thought the whole world was going to download it, and it was incredibly boring. And Topo, what are your sort of thoughts about the sort of the original idea and where it's taken us until we got to the discussion about Investments Unlimited?
Yeah, it's kind of, if you remember, John, before even 2017, we met first time in 2015 in Portland, and we had the first version of this as a small white paper. I think it was like 7 or 8 pages, and we published that. And I kind of took that and kind of went on to work on that for next 2 years. And then 2017, we came back in and said, okay, now probably, it's time to write another version of it. And then it came the Dear Auditor Love Letter, which is a love letter. Hey, auditors, we love you. We work together and we come together. But behind that, it actually had a list of things that we promised to do as a part of our development community, so that auditors' life become easier. And then the next version was the reference architecture. And then, the last time we met and, we talked about writing another paper, we thought that, okay, we went through 3 cycles of that, and what else could we write, right? How else could we drive that home? And then I think as a group, somebody suggested that let's write a story, and it's powerful because there are certain things that you can tell in a story that you cannot write in a paper. And those are the things that are around cultural obstruction, organizational complexity, and the things that you cannot write in a paper. And we thought that it's a brilliant idea to write a book or story and kind of bring those out instead of just the technicality of it.
I thought that, like the original, I think we were going to shoot. But so what happened is we gave our presentation to the other teams, and ours seemed so boring. And I think we regrouped and said, let's do this as a novella. But one of the things I like to think about is, like, me and you were like heavy theory, and enter John. We call him John Rezatowski. He walks in and he just executes. So he comes in to the 2019 paper, and then John, you just took this idea and went crazy with it. So tell me about sort of your experience, like.
Yeah, I mean, number one, we had so many good people on that first paper, right? I mean, we had Dwayne Holmes, we had who was on from Microsoft, Topo, because I sort of Sam, Guggenheimer. Just the best was watching Dwayne, Sam, and others up on the whiteboard just going to town and saying, like, no, you got to think about this, now you got to think about that. And then even then, when you start getting into the weeds on this stuff of saying, like, all right, hey, you know what? It's so easy to say, like, no, we use security tools. We have everything, and we give our developers all these open source things, and our developers have a security handbook that they have to follow, right? Well, it's a pretty big difference going to an auditor and saying, like, oh, our developers have a handbook and they have to follow it, right? Associated to what they're supposed to do. It's like, show me the evidence, right? And that gets insanely complex and tricky, right? And I can't tell you how many conversations Topo and I went back and forth on when you get into the weeds on some of this stuff, how you actually start taking this subjective change process that everyone lives in and making it objective and fact-based. And even then, you're going to find scenarios and circumstances that are going to be above and beyond your control. So you really have to be able to say, well, then what is our end goal? Is it traceability? Is it these other things? And I think it's contextual for each organization. But we were lucky enough to, I think, to take that and really run with it, and really, build some things, which is really interesting because I think you're seeing now a lot of companies announcing a lot of new things. I don't know if anybody saw the blockchain JFrog. I think John Willis called this 2 years ago, right? 3 years ago. But there was a big announcement by JFrog yesterday associated to being able to do blockchain, I believe, registry. And I think we're seeing like a lot of the output of a lot of those thoughts and ideas that we had really coming to fruition in the software industry today.
Yeah, and so I promised I'll get to everybody, but there was another thread sort of going on in parallel between somewhere around 2019 and the next couple of years, maybe before, where Caleb, you started to get involved with Gene's organization and DOS, and I know working a lot with Topo about audit. Like, so we started bringing IT auditors in. We started having conversations, sort of an ask me anything with auditors. We didn't have to. I'll shut up, but why don't you talk a little bit about like some of those experiences at DevOps Enterprise Summit?
Yeah, so I think a few years ago, if you were to ask perhaps the CISO and the CIO and then the chief audit executive, if they all had a plan for how they reduce risk as their organization builds stuff so that they can go out and compete and grow, maybe, what's their plan for DevSecOps? Maybe they would have all said yes, truthfully, if you're lucky, a few years ago. But none of them would have had the same plan. None of them would have said, we're all aligned at the same outcome together, and we have an easy way to go and see real time that the things we care about are happening, which is, I think, where John and crew comes in, putting this into practice, a framework for what good looks like, and then in real time capturing that stuff, and then keeping it somewhere safe that is tamper-proof. That's, I think, what is so exciting about this book and the journey that we've been on together over the past few years. What makes me very proud, because I think it's the right thing for a lot of large organizations today.
No, so awesome. And Michael, so
Hey,
you,
John, a quick thing. Can you turn up your microphone volume a little? It's little.
mine? Oh, my bad. Okay,
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. So Michael, along with John, so I think one of the interesting things there is, when you got involved with some of the stuff, John came back, he, like, even in the airport on the way home, he's on fire. Like, after we wrote the 2019 book, he's like bouncing. I'm trying to hold him off, he's like 4 inches off the ground. And I had no idea that he was literally going to just go nuts and try to implement all this stuff. But then you got involved with it, and then you got heavily involved in really making some significant enhances. And more importantly, I think really trying to work around all the, like, it's one thing to have a bunch of theories in a book in 2019. And the good news is in the recent book, I think we've addressed it, the real life matters, but you had to deal with the real life stuff. They're like, yeah, it's one thing to say we're going to have attestations and we're going to be better at audit, but in talking to you, you've had to struggle with building technology that actually works around a top bank.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that John and I found out together as we went and implemented this, is that, that white paper was so thorough, but nothing could account for some of the corners that you'd find when you bring it back to your own company. So we worked through a lot of those, and I think some of them were really clearly reflected in the book. At one point, we even get to the book where it was up in real time with what we were going through day to day. So we'd come home from a meeting and we'd jot down some notes and we'd write a scene. But yeah, we do try and get to a lot of those hangups that happen along the way, because implementation of this is a whole different beast once it's built.
That's cool. And then I'm deciding who should I say saving the best for last here, but even though I think Jason is the best, sorry guys, but I do want to, I think one of the things that was interesting for me is I've been doing these forum papers for I don't know, getting close to 10 years, and I've always been envious of not being able to work with Jason, like, oh man, when am I ever going to get to work on a paper with Jason Cox, so if you've never seen Jason's presentation and what he does at Disney, it's just off the chart. But it was really exciting to not only have you come in, because I think you're incredible, but also the entertainment and just we've been so focused on financials and show your experience there. There's a question in there somewhere, but
yeah, no, hey, I'll just say, I mean, it was great to be invited to the club. Like same, John, we actually talked several times, like, we got to do a paper together, right? So getting a chance to be able to join this group and be part of it, I think was brilliant. I will say this, like, I think so many people that have talked about the book say, oh, Investments Unlimited, so that's a financial book. Oh, that's related to the financial industry only, and related to the heavy regulations of the financial industry. But the reality is, anybody in any enterprise is dealing with
Mhm.
security, audit, and compliance, right? So we see that. And I think one thing that I thought was really brilliant about the work that has been happening at the forum for the last several years related to this area is that we could take this to the masses, right? Because many of us started on this. There's this whole scene in the book that talks about, right? DevOps failed you.
Yeah.
It's this big shock, right? Moment. It's like, what? And the reality is that as part of this journey we've been on of removing friction to allow our businesses to take technology to amplify what they're shipping, right? Delivering better, faster, and delivering happiness, right? In ways that delight customers across the planet. When you increase that, you also, right, need to carry along with that this concept of like, how do we also make it safer, more secure? Right. And I think there's a lot of us that have been on this journey have realized, oh, wow, we forgot to include our security experts. We forgot to include our auditors. We forgot to include them into this whole journey and this transformation. And as part of the story and the narrative we tell, it's like how we bring that in.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we want to do. Right. And that's what pull them into this narrative, this transformation story that we're all about. Right. And I think that's what's so exciting was to be able to work with this team and to see the amazing things that the multiple team members here, John Rez, Michael, some of the stuff you've done, phenomenal, like really real life stuff. And when we saw that, it says, we've got to be able to surface that. We got to be able to tell that story to get more people excited to go do the same thing, right? Because it will accomplish this goal, shipping value, business value, better, faster, safer, happier, right? In a way that can continually be compliant, continually, right? Have this automated governance around that makes our organizations safer, right? And that is what excited me about being able to join this group. And I think when I first did, I think we talked about like our first pitch on the paper. And we all came away and says, oh my gosh, academic and dry, right? But good, academic and dry. Says, why don't we tell a story about this? Let's go in the way of the Phoenix Project.
Yeah, Phoenix Project, like
It's do the same thing. And I can't remember. Like we said, okay, what's the name of the company, right? And we were thinking, what, Parts Unlimited?
Yeah.
Right. So what would be similar to that? And I can't remember who came up with it. It's a brilliant idea.
I love the my favorite sort of line should be the logo is your DevOps failed you, and which mirrors this DevOps DevSecOps conversation, right? There's a lot of people that believe that, myself included, that like we sort of forgot about security, and some people argue that that's not true. But then this was sort of I think we all sat down and had this idea of the CEO getting the notification that she's going to get a failed audit or MRIA. And then she asked everybody, well, wait a minute, like, I thought we were doing good. I thought we were DevOps, like we speak at conferences and like that's sort of you can be great at DevOps and still sort of suck at security. And Bill, so I got to tell a little bit story of Bill. So I get to Red Hat and, I'm trying to sell the story of, automated governance and all this. Like they tell me that this guy that's worked on a Department of Defense project called Dead Sword, which had built this whole really cool infrastructure, which like had almost all the underpinnings of like the thing that I saw. And it was sort of an immediate, marriage in heaven. Like we met and we started collaborating and Bill just, he was the chocolate, I was the peanut butter, to, what he was trying to do. And like, he had sort of the infrastructure of what I was trying to do. So Bill, tell me about your journey here. So.
Yeah, this is fun. Yeah, Jen, as you mentioned, it was like later 2020, early 21. We were talking about the automated governance concept. You'd actually introduced me to the whole concept, and if folks aren't familiar in the sort of the Department of Defense and the public sector space, there's this concept of an authority to operate, and so everybody talks about these ideas of continuous authority to operate. It's fundamentally the compliance arm saying to the organization that wrote their software, yes, you can now run it in production because it meets these controls. Well, people aren't well aware, that can take sometimes up to 9 months to get done. So if you think about something like a warfighter overseas that needs, something updated, like in getting 9 months, how do you reduce that? So as John introduced me to the concept, gave me a lot of the material, we started going to town, and it was fun. And we started co-oping and hacking on things with like Graphius at that point in time. But I clung to it because like my background has been in the shadow IT. And I really like the automated governance messaging concept, because a lot of it is the organization telling people no, but not telling them how to get there. And so as I saw what was really needed, that's what I loved about it, was like, okay, I can actually be part of this message of like, with even some of my previous experiences where people use security and compliance as sort of like the rhetorical, sorry, you can't go any further, you're not secure compliant. And like we were talking earlier, like this explicit, like John and Rez, you're talking about, so the explicit evidence, like how do you make this explicit so that, personally, how that's not an issue, but how do you solve that, the bigger approach? And yeah, John, as we were working together and started to build out, some messaging in that area around for Red Hat and the implementation, the approach, it was neat to see how you could bring in the government. They have this idea of continuous authority to operate. It's very ambiguous. It's almost as ambiguous as, the concept of automated governance could be, but how could we actually bring an example of how to do this? And a lot of people talk about automation, and automation always is the big key buzzword, but very few people really dive into the specifics of what does it mean to automate and how does your organization change as you apply the automation. And I think the automated governance stories we have at IUI, it's more than just the technology. It's like, well, what are the new rules? Like I love Beyond the Goal, the audiobook by Eliyahu Goldratt. He talks about his four questions. And one of them is like, what are the new rules you need to operate by? And what I really like about this is how we came to tell the story about these new rules. And like, John, as you and I already started to work together, I remember back in some of those early days as we're putting it was not just the technology, it's like, how are you describing to the organization beyond tech folks what it means to operate in this new world? And that was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Like with John Rez, like he'd invite me to Pittsburgh periodically. I'd come in and like, oh my crap, like you're really doing it, and then I'd come back and it'd be more. There's actually a question. It's probably a good one right now for like I have my own opinion on it, but I think this is a good one for Jason, John, or Topo. I hate to be the one to ask, but why didn't you just buy a tool? There seems to be several options on the market. Why spend your time on something you can buy, which makes better, or you better competitor? I have my opinion, but I'll go last. John, like why'd you go back and build an internal system? Couldn't you? Surely there was a vendor out there somewhere that did what you needed, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I kind of feel like why don't you buy DevOps? Right? Why don't you buy any other type of culture changing thing, movement? I think it comes back to, well, what are you buying exactly, right? There's a million tools out there in the world. There absolutely is. Is there tools that do this exact thing that we're talking about? I'm going to answer no. I think there might be several compilation of many different systems and tools. But I think if you don't understand your requirements, you don't understand how your complex systems work. And more importantly, like you guys all said, we missed out on asking the questions to the risk organization around what do they care about? Show us your process. Show us what you deal with. We really stuck with the developers and the operations and sysadmins, right? And to the security, we got to keep John's DevSecOps pieces very, very happy here. But we never really started figuring out. And I'd say like, I think you really, maybe you can buy it in your organization. Maybe, from a contextual perspective, that makes a lot of sense. But I think until you really understand all of the requirements and things that go into this, I think it's a very complicated answer. Is the way that I would say it.
Yeah, Topo, the same thing. I guess like when we first started talking, why didn't you say, John, we don't need to do this? There's already, company X already has it. Yeah. How come that wasn't the answer?
Yeah, and I kind of go back to what I said before, is that the main reason of writing the book in a form of a story is because there are many things that you cannot write in a paper. You cannot write non-technical stuff in a technical paper. And that's what John was talking about. What are you going to buy? You can always buy a tool, but you cannot buy your culture change. You cannot buy a tool to get your auditors and security folks and the product development team and the developers and the C-level people on the same table. That no tool is going to do that. So I think the book addresses those kind of things that are needed just beyond the tool concept. The tool, if you think about it, is kind of straightforward. you vent things out, you attest things out, and you evaluate before it goes out. But just to build that tool and the muscle and the organization is beyond just the tool. So you cannot just buy it out.
And Jason, what about from Disney's perspective? So you come in, you obviously read the 2019 paper, you were sort of aware of what we were doing, but then you get thrown in the middle of the lake here when you join this project. And what are your thoughts about like the space and what IUI, what John and Michael had built at PNC?
Yeah, I think I think we've hit on like kind of the core, which is that, yeah, buying, whether it's this whole concept of like, hey, there's a tool out there that fixes. It wasn't it, right? Really, it's about the transformation is the game, right? And the transformation is on the human layer. That's the interface, right? And what we saw, and I think this is rightly so, is part of the transformation here was changing and getting people to align on shared outcomes. Again, over and over again, like when you think about what DevOps is sort of all about, it's always been about that. Let's get together on shared outcomes and kind of proceed that same direction. And in this particular case, I think even on the business side, right, we tackle the challenge that we all have seen, I've seen, and many of you have seen in the industry, which is like, we don't prioritize security as a product feature. Like we don't even consider it in the product realm, right? We only sort of focus on the outcomes of like the feature we're delivering for our consumer, right? And the reality is we need to start changing the equation, start getting that shared outcomes around even security. The things they're going to meet and check the boxes on audit and compliance should be part of the product, right? I think that transformation isn't by just buying, a software off the shelf. This really is about the people change management aspect. And the whole journey, which I just found so compelling, both from Michael and John Rez's experience, personal experience, the things that Topos brought into the equation, the things that Bill brought, was that all these bits and pieces that we build really are in parallel to the human construction that is happening really behind the scenes that make it all possible. And I think there's even a surprise moment in the narrative when it may not even be the tool, right? And I think that that's the intent here, right? Is that hopefully people are picking up on, is that the transformation at the end of the day, it's all about people, right? And that's how we get to the better place.
No, it's brilliant. And, and in a way, like, like again, the effort of the people on this team, like totally dwarfs whatever contribution I've made, except that I like to think that I put the right chess pieces on the board. And Caleb was one who I knew had to be part of this, because, the conversations I've had with Caleb over the years, he really focuses on audit. And Caleb, some of the conversations we've had, what you brought in from the audit perspective, but also that idea that there's another group that, I was thinking about, like, we solved the dev and the ops problem, right? Like, so DevOps. We sort of doing okay with the AppSec and DevSecOps, but it's the IT risk that we're terrible at. And, and you've sort of brought up many times about like, how do we communicate with that group? How do we get them? And John, you've said this to me too, many times, like you still feel like we're not on the same page with the internal audit. But Caleb, talk about some of your ideas and some of the things you've expressed to me about that.
For sure. I think the core conflict that we talked about years and years ago between dev and ops, we expanded the scope, the aperture a bit. We got security kind of into the conversation. But, as you mentioned, and as we've talked about here, internal audit has been not an afterthought, but not a priority until now. And I think, they're not, great folks. Obviously, we love all our internal audit colleagues, but they're also not instrumented. They're not equipped to be successful. Reducing risk is something that changes so fast as DevSecOps, right? Where infrastructure that was here today is gone tomorrow. Code is certainly changing, maybe many times a day. And when you have an internal audit approach in many organizations, that may look like swinging by once a year, taking some screenshots, maybe sampling. It's a very small sliver of ephemeral things that, when you walk away, you say, do I really feel much better now that I took these samples and I had these screenshots? Do we really have trust that the right things are happening by our dev teams and the security folks working together? And I think that's, again, for me, perhaps the most powerful part of this book is that we're breaking down another silo that enables the right velocity. Once we get, all of these tribes who speak different languages, who have different ways of looking at the world, different data sets, we're giving them a single, forgive me, pane of glass that, all of our attestations, we'll call them, are in the same place, and we all trust that they haven't been tampered with. And, that may sound easy. I hope it doesn't, because that's a massive level of effort to get that alignment. And this book is a story of that across a financial institution. John,
Okay, yeah.
I was just going to say one other thing,
Sure.
in case it's not absolutely clear to the audience, like, who is this book for? Is it for high performers only? Is it for financial institutions only? I mean, I'll pose that to the group, John. I'll let you run with that one.
Sure. Yeah, let's sort of like summarize with that. But I did want to, there's another question here I think works really well for both Michael and Bill. So I kill one question with two people. And Michael, maybe the bank perspective or financial perspective, and Bill, maybe the government perspective. One of the things that the question here is reusable templates for new automated controls, liability, table chaos engineering, but continuous verification, definitely part of it. I think, I'm going to sort of steal that question a little bit to say something that I think we talked about even before the 2019 book is, if we did this and we did this right, could there be reusable templates like a PSI DSS or HIPAA or those? And I think, since Michael, you were pretty deep in the weeds of implementation at your former bank, I'd love to hear your thoughts about all the work you've done to build all these rules and automate them. And then sort of after that, ditto for Bill with sort of the government as well, with some of the sort of the NIST or any of the particular government authority to operate stuff. So Michael, if you're okay, you go first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to the extent that these templates really become necessary are when you're, especially in a large organization, when you've got multiple different ways of achieving what most people that aren't developers would consider, a certain control, right? So you could have a ton of different ways that you could be, building artifacts at a large institution, but whether or not that artifact comes from a verified provenance is the same, right? And so these templates can be used in that regard to say, here are the core things that we need to do, and they can be instantiated all the different ways that your organization does that. And that gets back to what Caleb was talking about, this shared language. That's really the key to unlocking all of the cooperation necessary to get the most value out of this automated governance. So that shared language sort of begins at, did you do the thing that you were supposed to do, right? And the templates can be the outcome of the thing that you're supposed to do. And you can instantiate it multiple different ways underneath, right? And so I think, to that extent, that's where the templates really become necessary. But at the same time, depending on how unique your organization is, you may have needs to do a whole bunch of one-offs, and that's okay too. I think it's important to really understand your organization and what your needs are, to decide how much of what you want to build should be a template versus, unique to your organization.
Very cool. Bill, your thoughts about, government work or really anything, but I know you spend a lot of time.
Yes. I think Mike hit about it. I think there's variability as we start to think about sort of like toil inside of the governance process. There's a lot of variability how things can do things. And Mike hit on it, like you could probably do things 2 or 3 different ways. And as everybody's talking here, like I think about self-interest, and we think about what DevOps was. DevOps is just sort of like a team negotiating the collective interest over the self-interest. And I sort of see these templates as that whole approach. And the idea behind it is, if you look at this template, you can almost look at it as like a contract for operations, or just called a governance contract. And so it is that the output of, okay, we've negotiated our selfish interest for this broader interest. And the beauty behind that, and it gets to what Rez was talking about earlier, is once you've negotiated that and you've made it explicit, that now can become automated by machines. And so as you start thinking through, and Jason, I think you're hit about this earlier, like the human process, like technology is just an implementation of a human system. It's just bits and bytes doing it instead of, people turning cranks. And so we start to think through like what these templates and represent, and especially around like the ATO and like say like NIST RMF, the risk management framework. A lot of these frameworks are very broad. They tell you what you need to do, not specifically how to do it. So that negotiation of that selfish interest and that template, and I'll call it the governance contract, when an organization can come and establish these, you now have made it explicit and you've made the agreement explicit. So it now moves past there's always the emotional aspect of the governance process where people aren't getting what they want or don't, like you move past that. And now you've actually had an argument to say, here's what we need to do. And here's how we focus. And then think about auditability and clarity. Like a lot of it, toil is just the ambiguity around what to expect and what to do. You've now removed that toil, that unnecessary work around due to the ambiguity. And so it's just that variability reduction. And I think that's the focus there. And like, as I close this out, it's like really automated governance is a couple people coming together, the organization representatives saying, okay, what do we want to, what's that explicit agreement to doing? And then the technology is easy. We just scan, we just build something like, Mike and John, this is build something to look at the unit test and just basically say, we agreed we're going to have 80% coverage. And so like, we can now codify that with an 80% being the lower bounds and you go forward. So I think that's really key because a lot of people, we do this as the human system. We just, now it's actually bringing in the efficacies and efficiencies of automation to then free us up to then start focusing really on what are the next controls that we want to address.
So reducing variation, that's an interesting concept. Never thought about that. The Deming Geek. Hey, I'm going to knock this one out, and then I wanted to just leave it open for any of you guys to ask me questions or anybody to ask anybody else. But this is a quick sort of fun one here. The question is, to Jason's point, are there any cameos from Parts Unlimited? So I'm going to answer that, and I'll say no. But if you read the book, and then like if you want to tweet it, this goes all the way back from GoRat the goal. There's this core chronic conflict, and there's this Socratic-like relationship. It's Alex and Jonah in the goal. In the Phoenix Projects, Bill and Eric. And so I'll leave it up to you to figure out what that relationship is in Investments Unlimited. But there is that. And one of the hints is that in the Phoenix Project, I think it's like a whole discussion about bagels in a meeting when they're sort of talking about the conflict. Here it's cannolis. So, anyway, so we snuck that little piece in if you get it. But yeah, so, but no, I don't believe we have any true, that probably would have been a clever idea to have somebody from Parts Unlimited, but I don't think we did that. So, but yeah, hey, you guys, include Leah. I mean, anybody have any questions for anybody else here? And I'll keep sort of looking for questions on the board. But
yeah, thanks so much, John. I think I want to throw a question out to all the authors here about what maybe one of your favorite scenes was throughout the book. As we were writing the book, things happened in the real world. We were in a pandemic. Then as we were very deep in, we had all kinds of deadlines about writing this book. Log4j hit and nothing happened on the book for a long time because of it. I wondered if any of you guys want to talk about how the real world influenced anything in the book.
I'm going to start really quick because it's funny. Like we said, this first starts off. So the way these forum papers work is, typically we go to Portland, but the last couple of years have been virtual, where we spend a couple of days together and we sort of and there's like 50 or 60 books out there, all Creative Commons material, and not just security, about everything, including the ones that Topo mentions, like Dear Auditor and the original Audit and DevOps, and Unlikely, something the original one. But so you work on that. So you put 2 days together, and it's like an insane thing. It's like a crash course. Like you had 2 days, and then the final day you do a readout, and then you work for about 3 months. Correct me, Leah. And then you're supposed to produce your paper. So there's this interesting thing, like things like Log4j, or somebody gets sick, or there's a pandemic and a family needs to be addressed, or you just get pulled away for work. And so everybody has their sort of pieces in the collage. And then at that point, I think, like, I probably was being minorly rude to you, but Leah we were done. And Leah, you kept coming back, like, it would be really great if you could do this. And finally I was like, sort of polite, but like, Leah, we're done. You're squeezing like nothing left out of this, whatever, fruit or whatever. And then she came back with Gene and said, like, what if you all wanted to turn this into a book? And then it's the same thing, right? Now we had almost, I don't know, 8-9 months, maybe a year to sort of turn it from a paper into a book or a novella into a novel. And again, it's sort of interesting, even for myself, there would be points where I'd be all in and then life would get in the way. So it's sort of interesting I've done multiple author books, and in my experience, that's how it works. At the end, you're all on the end of the book. Your names are on the book, but you sort of expect that you're working in a group of people, and life happens, and that certainly happened, I think, for almost everybody in this project. So.
Yeah, let me quickly jump in and Leah, your question, were we influenced by real life events? Absolutely. I think each and every part of the story is real life, either associated with the real life story and or real character. And one perfect example is, of course, Log4j event, because we actually had a section addressing supply chain, and then Log4j happened, and then we had to expand that section. And Bill, you are kind of jumped in right there during that time, and you kind of expanded that section to probably a chapter now in there.
That was fun too. I remember when all that happened, it went quiet. Actually, to one of the questions on here, anything specific experiences, like as Topo's already talked about, like a lot of this, and was what everybody experienced. But at that point in time, as Log4j happened, I was working on an upstream open source design, because people talk about software build materials, but like, how do you query this kind of stuff? And so like, as I was writing, expanding that section that Topo was talking about, I'm over here on my Archimate and I'm building a couple open source initiatives. Like, okay, what did it look like to, bring this in? And so that was actually a really neat opportunity as we're writing the book and some of the stuff happened in real time to actually like, that whole day I worked on something around it. So then I turn around and basically he's like, okay, how do I turn this into a part of a story? And so that was a really fun aspect to then, expand that out. And yeah, that was neat. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember, but the when Leah pulled us all in and she said, okay, we need to work on the antagonist, right? Because we wrote it too nice, right? Like everyone was too nice. And she's like, and then, I think it took us a little bit to get going, but then after that, I think I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of antagonism when it comes. And in fact, I think the reason DevOps is so popular is because it's so relatable to those types of things that happen. Oh, you want to talk about CMDBs? Oh, we'll talk about CMDBs all day, right? But I do think it was absolutely, and I think some people put it in there, what was happening in the industry while we were writing the book was live. It was action, right? Like, remember when Caleb told us all about the executive order that came out from the government around software supply chain changes, and it was like, holy cow. Perfect timing. So, and then the only other thing I'd add is a ton of research went into this, talking to a lot of people. And I would say that was very eye-opening. And I think there's definitely call outs for some of the people we got to talk to and some of the things we got to see happening that absolutely portray exactly what happened in the story.
A real life bank that actually got a cease and desist. We won't mention who, that actually had outstanding MRAs and got an MRIA. I mean, like in the middle of our book, there's a real life bank that gets a cease and desist from the OCC, right? So anyway, yeah.
It's actually funny you talk about this. So this didn't happen while I write in the book, but just recently in my day job, I've come across an organization it's a financial organization not based in the United States, but they received something very familiar with the MRIA. And so it's actually interesting as we're going through this book and like going back to John, when we talk about the research, that actually would have fun to prepare for that conversation. But it gets back to the reality as we're discussing, like, okay, this approach that we talk about in the book in your organization, like I always go and like I'll show the book and be like, Mike and John, like they've done this at PNC, right? And we talk about it and it's, this is what it means. And so that's actually been a really recent experience, at least in my world. I'm like, oh, it's like, I don't come initially from the finance, a lot of it's been in the US government side, but having that relatable conversation, especially across cultural boundaries, has been that was a really cool conversation.
Yeah, and to be honest, Bill, I don't think that we have made up anything in the story. It's all real.
That's right.
In my
Yeah,
opinion.
besides the characters and maybe the storyline, like you're absolutely right. There's everything in here is a real occurrence from an experience of somebody else, like of the co-authors.
Yeah, I think from the boardroom to the conference room to the hallway conversations, those are like real, right? Those are coming from the DNA of our collective experiences getting poured into the narrative, right? And I hope people, it resonates with you, right? I hope everyone sees it and like says, oh, that was me too. And I think that was definitely our experience, like reading through this. And I think that narrative is also one of the things that gets you to sort of the aha moments, right? Is like, yeah, I'm in that, and the crisis hits, right? This that could destroy the bank, and how essentially we see every character having to grapple with that, and like how they carry it through, all the interactions between the characters as they struggle to get to that better place, as they struggle to form the better culture and even get the automation in place. I mean, that's the other thing I think this hit, and I'm trying to remember when it did, but we talked quite a bit about this, like the automation, and we talked about like buying software to fix it. But the one thing that was getting highlighted, I think, in the industry was make the right way easy, and people will do the right thing. Right? There's this, we make things the right way so hard, sometimes people can't actually get to right. Right. And I think what our intent was like, let's get the automation in place. Let's put this process in place that actually does the right thing, and it makes it easy to do the right thing. And hopefully that's something that you will pick up as the story thread that you can weave into your own enterprise, right, to help you too.
And if I may offer one more thing on that question about, where things were based, I think some of the things that we did try to do in the book were provide just a taste of some of the obstacles that you may run into when you try to do this within your own organization. And I'll use just one example. In a section of the book, it mentions app rails, which is this sort of rogue pipeline in a smaller division of Investments Unlimited, and it really poses a hurdle to the group as trying to get people to a standardized way of building and deploying. And I think that was sort of a larger concept. I don't know if it was based specifically on any real world experience, but we did want to sort of indicate with things like that, there's different hurdles that if you run into these, that's okay, right? We might not prescribe the specific way that you can get around it, but we do want you to know that you're going to see it. And it can be worked around. So those shouldn't be stopping points for you if you run into them.
Wonderful. Well, I think we have about just about 10 minutes here, and there's a lovely comment / question from Damon Edwards over there that I want to throw out at all of you all.
It'd be a great way for everybody to sort of do a quick who they are, who they work for, which we did do in the beginning. And then with that, if you want to answer Damon's question of what's the best and most important book released by Terry Religious. So I'll just go from my view, upper left, and work our way down. So Bill, who you are, who you work for. I mean, we are Bill Bensing. But,
yeah. Bill Bensing, I work for Red Hat now. Formal title is managing architect for the North American public sector. What I do in a day job is this concept of a software factory, and John talked about that sort of the DoD enterprise DevSecOps references. I know we talk about making it easy to do the right thing. So I help our customers build these let's just call it software delivery as a service capabilities, so they can institutionalize and ultimately codify and automate what it looks like to do the right thing in the organization, and focus not just on development and operations, but compliance and security and audit as well. And so Damon, why is this the best and most important book? I will argue right now, GRC, security compliance audit, it is the next bottleneck in software delivery. And why this will be, maybe it's not the last one, but it's the next biggest one. So what I love most about this book, the most important, is because it's the reality of how to resolve and think about addressing this bottleneck based upon situations that all others and through our research we've come across. And what I love about it too is and I wish I'd have read stuff like the delicate art of bureaucracy and a couple things before, because if you think about bureaucracy and stuff like that, and Mark's first hit it, you talk about learning bureaucracies, and there's so many things that you can link into some of the other IT Revolution books, especially around from project to product, because that's the whole same concepts, and also the team topologies. And why I think this is the most important one is while we didn't directly call out some of those, this is an amalgamation of those experiences that provide additional proof to a lot of those observations and summarizations of those books. And so, and then the ideas there. But
Thanks,
that was a little bit long-winded. Thanks.
Yeah. And just I'll quickly go. Andrew Clay Schaefer, myself, Kevin Bear, and Jay Bloom, we all left Red Hat. We just started a company called Ergonomic Systems. So we'll look for that. Yeah, I think this is the Phoenix Project for. Hey, Damon, how's it going? The Phoenix Project for security. I think this is the kind of book that people are going to give to the manager and tell their manager read it, and they'll go, "Oh, now I get it." So, Jason.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks. I lead the global SRE team, as mentioned at Disney. I think what Caleb said earlier, what really is important is that this book, like, we're not targeting just fintech, financial, banking industry, right? That this applies. Anybody sort of wanting to ship products, right? Experiences to your consumer base better, faster, safer, and happier. Like, this applies. Like, you want to get the value out faster, this applies. I'd say this, like, sort of trying to answer Damon's question too, is that there's an incredible foundation, IT Rev, that this sort of is built upon, right? This book just adds a layer to, like, the foundation there, including all the papers we were talking about. Phenomenal. Please check them out. I think those all have added to the story. This adds a layer on top of, like, sort of trying to wrap it together in this automated governance world. Like, what can we do in a better way to make this make our businesses, our enterprises better? And so hopefully, like, that is the icing, I guess you would say. It adds another layer, right, to the cake, if you will, of this great body of work that has come out of this community, this DevOps community, and the IT Revolution team. So,
shoulder of giants. Mr. John Rez, my good buddy.
Worked in a lot of financial services, a lot of different banks the last several years, and have just tried to come and do something different than I think what's typically been done at financial services is how I satisfy myself, I suppose. And real quick, Andres Vega is not here, one of the co-authors. He did a podcast with Andrew Schaefer recently, and I think they hit the problem spot on of why this is, like, one of the most important things. And Andrew talked about when we were solving the development on the operations side, it was to solve the big web. And the big web was primarily development and operations. And those were for very large companies or technology specific companies like Flickr, et cetera. Well, and we go to all these DevOps days and these things, and, like, lots of times, my teams come out of those conferences so high, so jazzed up, so ready to go. And then they come back to their day jobs and they realize, like, process and things just beat them down to submission. So the reason I think it's more important than anything else is maybe this gives people that work in large regulated enterprises a chance to have that same freedom and fun that some of those that people got to see during those original DevOps, exploration days, for sure.
The infamous Topo Pal.
Hey, I'm Topo Pal. I'm at Fidelity Investments. My focus area is DevOps adoption across Fidelity and open source program office. Why is this book most important? I think it's theory of constraint. The Phoenix Project actually laid out the groundwork for why you should do DevOps. And then, as you all know, while implementing DevOps, we face trouble, right? We face problems because at the end, if we are not compliant, if we do not have auditability, if we don't have security concerns taken care of, it fails. So this book actually addresses a failure scenario and gives you some examples of the situation that you'll run into. Even if you don't run into this failure scenario, you will run into these obstacles. And this book actually presents an idea as to how to recover from them and be successful at it. So this is just one example. There may be many more, and maybe we'll address them in the future books.
Awesome. Caleb?
This is my topo stack.
There you go.
So my name is Caleb Quern. I am a director with KPMG's cybersecurity consulting practice. And why this might be the most important book ever by IT Rev That's tough. I'm such a fanboy of everything IT Rev has ever published. But I think it's important right now. What makes me excited about it is that, as the guys have hinted, over the past, say, 7-10 years, we've all come along this journey together, and the organizations we work for have as well. At the end of the day, the groups that we tend to work for, like folks in this call, folks in the audience, they are usually regional or global in scale. And when the projects we work on together, we can deliver faster with less risk and be more successful in the market. We really have the opportunity to impact people's lives and drive innovation, stability, and economic growth around the world. It's a planet scale thing that we can impact together. And this book, I think, helps us do that. So that's why I'm so excited about it.
Michael?
Yeah, so I like John, I've worked in financial services for most of my career, and I have a lot of experience operationalizing some of the concepts and technologies that we discuss in either the white paper or in Investments Unlimited. I've got experience rolling it out across a large enterprise, and I've got the scars to prove it.
And Leah, why don't you wrap it up for us? I think.
Absolutely. So as I said at the beginning, I'm Leah Brown, I'm the managing editor here at IT Revolution. Had the wonderful opportunity of working with all of these lovely people you see here, as well as Andres Vega and Helen Beal, two of the co-authors who are not able to join us today. I hope that everyone in the audience learned a little bit more about this book and what we feel it's going to offer to the DevOps and the larger IT tech business community. Risk, security, audit, it is a huge issue, and we're very excited to be exploring it in more depth and helping to provide more possible solutions. I think, as a number of you all said, Topo, Jason, maybe Michael as well, this presents one possible example of the obstacles that you all are facing or have faced or will face in the future. And it shows you one possible solution. But at the end of the day, I think what all of our books have shown, what this book shows, what all of your wonderful experiences show, is that it's about the people and that's about the culture change. So we hope that this helps illustrate just a little bit of that. I hope everyone out there enjoys it. Please let us know what you think. We always want to hear feedback. Learning is a gift. You can talk with us over on Twitter. You can talk with, I believe, all of these lovely authors over on Twitter or LinkedIn. Let us know what you think. Post reviews of the book. We want to know. In the chat over here on the Zoom, I have added a complimentary code for everyone on the call to go and get the accompanying reader's guide to Investments Unlimited. That includes basically a chapter by chapter breakdown with discussion questions and themes. So if you want to hold a book club or you just want to dive in deeper for yourself, it's there, it's free. I'll also send it in an email to everyone who signed up after the fact. Otherwise, I want to say happy book birthday to all you wonderful authors. Thank you for working on me with this. Thank you to all the readers out there who are about to go on this wonderful journey with Michelle and everyone in the book. Thank you again. And guys, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.